Yes, you can start off, Dennis.
Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Dennis, and today we're going to learn about the secrets to the college admissions process. Um, so, the agenda for the meeting is to first, we're going to talk about college admissions strategy, and then we're going to touch on the college admissions process. And then point three is we're going to talk about the admissions essays. And then finally, I'll just spend a brief amount of time talking about my company. And finally, we'll do some question and answer at the end. Um, just very briefly about my background. So I'm based in New York City. I'm a graduate of MIT as well as the Columbia University Graduate School of Business. And I've spent time working in admissions. So I have a good understanding of what admissions officers look for, their mindset, and how they evaluate applications. And I've also written two books on the subject of college admissions essays. So the first part, we're going to talk about college admissions strategy. So you have to keep in mind that when you're applying, especially to a top tier college, during those few months, maybe September through December, early January, they read thousands of applications and they're reading applications all day long. And after a while,
Hi,
the
Dennis. I'm
stories.
so sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, but someone's asking me to request you to speak a little louder because they can't hear you very well.
Oh, certainly. Okay. Um, so, like I was saying, the stories start to blend together. And so it's very important to stand out as much as possible. Um, so, what do colleges want? They're basically looking for students who are going to be successful, not just on campus, but also after they graduate. So they want impressive individuals who are going to make a difference in the world. So when you're filling out your applications and everything, you definitely do not want to be modest. However, you don't want to be arrogant either. So you want to kind of strike a balance somewhere in between, but definitely you want to come across as a confident candidate. And finally, you want to make sure that you maintain like a winning mindset throughout the entire admissions process. So that way you come across as a candidate that the colleges are really interested in admitting. So one thing that I recommend looking at well, I guess how to approach the admissions process is as a marketing campaign because you're basically selling yourself to the admissions office. So just like for example, let's say you're applying to a college that like one of the top tier colleges, acceptance rate, 5%. So that's basically they're admitting 1 out of 20 students, and so let's say they're down to the three students and they've eliminated the other 17. So you're looking at three that are just, I mean, exceptional. I mean, any one of those three, could, be admitted and do extraordinarily well at the college. So then the question is, how do they differentiate between these three amazing candidates? And so basically the solution is you have to have something that differentiates you from those other two, something where they look at your application and they say, wow, this candidate is really something. We really have to admit them. So, and we're going to go into that a little more process, a little in a bit later in terms of how you can go about doing that. Um, so the college admissions process, I'm going to go through a lot of the steps in the process and offer some advice as we go through it. So, very first thing, the Common App. This is going to be the website where you're going to be spending a lot of time throughout, like I say, the later part of, or the first semester, senior year, and the summer beforehand. So their website is commonapp.org, and whenever you are, I guess probably sometime in the summer before senior year, you want to create an account, which is very simple. And this is where you're going to be entering all of your personal information. You're going to be entering your college list and ultimately your Common App essay. So, of the more than 2,000 colleges in the United States, every single one of them is on there. except for MIT. So if you're interested in MIT, you have to go directly to their website and fill it out on their portal. Um, so academics, this is the primary area, the primary criteria that colleges use for admission. So they consider your grades, but also the rigor of your courses as well. So if someone is taking easy classes and have a 4.0, whereas someone is taking a very rigorous course load and get a 3.8, 3.9, the latter is definitely going to be given more consideration. Um, you have to balance the number of APs as well. So, and this is kind of a gray area. So the question could be, should I take, 3 APs and feel confident that I'm going to get A's, or should I take 4, and possibly, be open to the fact I might get a B in that fourth one. So again, this is something you kind of have to evaluate on your own. But in general, admissions does look for rigorous courses. Another big part of the application is extracurriculars, and it's much more important to have 3 or 4 key activities where you really dive into, as opposed to having many activities where you only have a superficial involvement. In your extracurriculars, try to seek out leadership positions as much as possible. If there's some clubs in your high school that don't exist, that you have an interest in or a passion for, you can always start a new club, and that's something that admissions looks favorably upon. Shows initiative and drive. If you're involved in sports, especially at the varsity level, or if you're a fairly high-level musician, admission is going to consider that, and they're going to realize that either one of those two requires a very big time commitment, and so they aren't going to look at activities as much as if you don't participate in those. I mean, they still want to see some, but they understand that these activities do require a fair amount of time. Volunteering. This is something that colleges really expect. So it's not a question of should I or shouldn't I, but you really have to spend some time volunteering. Try to pick something that interests you, and in addition, try to pick something that's fairly unique. So, I mean, one thing that so many people do is volunteering at the homeless shelter, or tutoring kids, and I mean those are perfectly good, and if those are the only options available to you, that's fine. But as much as possible, try to pick something that's a little more unique, that's a little different. And like I was saying earlier, you want to differentiate yourself as much as possible, from other candidates, and so that's yet another way you could do that. A passion project. This is something very important, and I really can't stress this enough. So regardless of everything else you do, having something that you are working on, that you created on your own, and let's say for 2 years or possibly even more, this is going to differentiate you a great deal from other candidates. So this is something that's going to demonstrate initiative, drive, leadership, and original thinking. So spend plenty of time, brainstorming ideas of, what this could, what this project could be all about. And, keep in mind that it should be tied to your interests, because, I mean, it just kind of makes sense on the one hand. And if it's not something you're interested in, you probably won't be as successful doing it. And keep in mind, this is, fairly long-term endeavor, at least a couple of years. And it's not easy, but I mean, it's definitely going to be worth it. Just to give you an example, I had a student last year, very skilled in videography. I mean, almost at the professional level, like videos, editing, and just everything about it. And he wanted to volunteer at a homeless shelter. And so, we got to talking, brainstorming, and finally we came up with a great idea, which was take his videography skills and just go out into the field and interview homeless people. And, when was the last time you saw an account of a homeless person being interviewed? I mean, basically, you see them on the news and you hear stories, but to get a firsthand account was something that, didn't exist. And so he put these on his website. The website completely took off, and he solicited donations. And he ended up giving a very sizable contribution to the shelter where he originally was going to volunteer at. So this is a great example of, taking something that you have a interest in and just going the next level. And like I said, this wasn't an easy project. There were a lot of steps to it, but in the end, this kind of thing really impressed admissions. And he got into Brown University, which was his first choice. So that worked out very well for him. In terms of summers, you want to definitely make sure that you use your summertime effectively. One thing you can do is research. And if you're looking for some advice on research, I know just who you can contact. And college courses, those are also something that's, looked favorably upon. And usually they're maybe like 2 or 3 weeks. So, they're not a big commitment. And internships or just jobs. I mean, that's something that, colleges look favorably upon. Finally, letters of recommendation. So in the beginning of junior year, I would identify 3 teachers that you think would give you good letters, and then over the course of junior year, develop good relationships with them. Don't just kind of sit by quietly and passively in class. Engage a little bit more, and maybe after class you can ask them questions or just and so during the second semester, that's where we're going to ask for the actual letters. And when you do, some schools have a brag sheet that you can fill out, which has all information about you. If your school doesn't, give them some background information about you. And what I recommend is giving them a full resume so they have, everything they wanted to know in detail. But then in addition to that, just have like a cover page which has 6 or 7 bullet points, which is like the key things that you want them to know about you. And be very polite and respectful when you ask for the letters, and definitely send a thank you note. So this is something that takes time, and they do it of their own goodness. So definitely be cognizant of that. So the ACT and SAT. The default for most students is just to take the SAT, but they are fairly well, I mean, there are a lot of similarities between the two, but they are distinct. So what I would recommend is taking a practice test for each of those, and then just see what kind of percentile you achieve. And then once you figure out which you're better suited for, continue taking practice tests. That's one of the best ways to really get good at it. Study for it as well. Again, very important. And, as needed, get a tutor. And I would recommend taking at least 2 actual tests. Some students take 4 or 5 down. I think that's a bit much, but, at least 2, just to make sure, you get the highest score possible. Maybe on the first time you're just not, just kind of getting used to the whole testing environment. So at least 2, possibly even 3. So the college list. I would recommend visiting colleges in person as much as possible. If you aren't able to, a lot of the colleges on their websites, they have good virtual tours. And then there's the standard, technique to roughly divide them into 3, like safety schools, target, and then reach. One recommendation I would give is that, especially if you're applying to, top tier colleges, add a few more reach schools. And the reason is that, let's say, with these acceptance rates that are so low, you know, there's unfortunately there's a certain amount of randomness in the process. There's some subjectivity. So just to kind of counteract that, if you apply to more colleges, that will, offset, that situation. So, okay. Deadlines. So early action and early decision is November 1st. And then regular action kind of varies for a lot of the colleges. Typically, it's in like the first few days of January. There are some colleges that extend into February, but just a few. And for early action, the odds of admission are actually higher than regular decision. However, it's a little bit skewed because most, you know, driven, accomplished students, they're really on the ball and they apply early. And so that's part of the reason you have a much stronger pool of students for early action. But even so, there is a little bit of an edge in terms of your acceptance rate. And early decision, you can only apply to one college, and once you're accepted, you're committed to that college. Okay. Um, Interviews. Generally, after you applied, colleges will request interviews, although it's not for sure. It really depends on the availability of the colleges. And oftentimes they use alumni to do interviews. Um, this is one part of the application that's very stressful to a lot of students. Try to relax and just be yourself. I know that's easier said than done, but keep in mind this is just one component of the entire application process, and it's not going to make or break your application. Um, and also keep in mind the net result is basically a summary document that the interviewer gives to the admissions office. So when I interviewed students, the biggest challenge I had was not getting enough information from the student, because when an interviewer um, is giving you information, basically all they know is your name, your contact number, and your high school. They don't see anything else about your application or your essays or anything. So give them information that they can write about. Like I was saying, one challenge I had is I would ask someone a question and they'd give me like a 15-second answer, and by the end of the interview, I had to figure out what report to write. And in those cases, it was very difficult. So, definitely, speak at length, about your background and interest and activities, so they have, a good amount of information that they can write about. So, at the end of the process, you're going to be getting admissions results. If you're accepted, awesome. If you're rejected, some colleges do accept appeal letters. Some just say, they do not want them, but there's actually a fair amount that do accept them. And usually they're centered around if there's something new about your application, or if there's just something that wasn't included in your original application. If you're deferred or you're waitlisted, um, definitely write what's called a LOKI, which is a letter of continued interest. And this letter basically contains two parts. One is a summary of just what's new with you since you submitted your application, and the second part is just reiterating your passion for the university and that you really want to attend. So this oops. Oops, accidentally went back. Okay. This is very, very important. In your application, you really want to have a theme. If you have, let's say, several activities and they're just kind of all over the place, um, that's not going to be looked upon as favorably as if you have like a central theme that admissions can look on and say, okay, this is what the student is all about. And so, as a first step, you want to decide on a major or at least like an area of study that you want to pursue in college. Some students declare or undeclared, which is not the best approach. But, for example, let's say you're interested in pre-law, then some activities that you really want to do are like debate club, doing public service. If you're interested in medicine, you want to do some shadowing, some clinic volunteering. If you're interested in one of the areas of science, definitely want to do research projects and maybe even some teaching. And engineering, for that, like an internship is very important. Many are in robotics club, and then coding projects. So again, depending on what your interests are, I would, pick activities that all kind of merge on that interest. So then when they look at your application, they can say, okay, this student is interested in physics and everything he's done is kind of related to that, and I can kind of see where everything's heading. Um, okay. Um, Okay, so the next part, I want to spend a little bit of time on the essays because this is one part of the application that students kind of struggle with a fair amount. So this is a very different kind of essay that you've normally written in high school. So in high school, your audience was your teacher, and your goal was to get an A. But now for your admissions essay, your audience is an admissions officer that doesn't know anything about you, and the goal is no longer to get an A, although the writing has to be impeccable. But your goal is for them to read through it and just say, wow, this student was amazing. We have to admit this student. So again, very important. Admissions is going to know pretty much all about you from looking at your application. So this is the part where you have a chance to just show them, something new, especially with, test scores being optional. The essay carries, much more importance now than it used to. So, what do admissions look for in the essay? A lot of different things, but just a few that come to mind is like depth of thought, maturity, growth, insights, and unique perspectives. You don't have to cover all of these, bullet points in your essay, but you should cover at least one or two. So then the big question is, what should the essay be about? Um, Very difficult. So um, it's definitely not a resume. It's not a list of accomplishments. It's more of a story, a narrative. You want to show admissions, who you are, what makes you special and unique, and you want to show them the person behind the application and behind, all the data behind the test scores and the courses and the grades. And your ultimate goal for your essay is for them to convince you to accept you. It's not to put together a great story. It's not to be funny or engaging or that. I mean, these are things you should do, but the end goal is for them to read it and come away with, we have to admit this student, look at what he told us. So the Common App essay prompts, there are 7 prompts, and I mean, these are all on the Common App essay, and if you Google them, you can find them. One thing I wanted to mention is number 7 is, well, the first 6 are not too specific, but at least they guide you to a certain extent. But number 7 is completely open-ended. And I would say at least 90% of the students I work with, they do number 7 because, there's no limitation in terms of what you can write, what your story is all about. So anyway, which one should I pick? Again, particular one doesn't matter. They're all different ways to get you thinking about a storyline. If one of the first 6, really resonates with you, then you can go with that. But otherwise, number 7 is a very good one. So a big and very challenging part of the Common Up essay is picking a topic. So don't rush the process. Spend plenty of time brainstorming, and keep in mind that this is not an autobiography. Focus on what would be effective and something that would be impactful. In addition, think about what makes you unique as a person, what differentiates you from your peers, what's important to you in life, what your passions are, and what you want admissions to know about you. So you can either write about something that's not anywhere else in the application, or you can write about something that is there as long as you kind of expand on it, put it into context and kind of tell the full story. You don't need to have extraordinary experiences in order to have an extraordinary essay. You can have a life or death situation, and if you write about it very dryly and don't really have much else to say than just describing it, that's not going to be a strong essay. However, if you're just walking through a Costco and you have a lot of interesting things to say, that's going to be a strong essay. And I bring this up because the Costco essay is actually one of those viral essays that is on the internet all over the place. And again, the student just wrote about, walking through Costco, but underneath that, the discussion was, a lot of insights and, very keen observations about, what she saw and then how that connects to her life. So again, the particular topic doesn't matter as much. It's what you have to say about it. Another thing I would mention is stick to your high school years. If you want a spelling bee in sixth grade, admissions does not care. And so many essays I come across, they're all about elementary school and junior high. Admissions wants to know about your high school years, so keep that in mind. Um, so once you have a topic in mind, you want to, put together a fairly detailed outline, but use it as a roadmap because often just the process of writing will spark new ideas and new thoughts. And also make sure the first draft is, mainly on content. You can focus on the writing and the English part of it, later. But the first draft, again, all about content, ideas, what you want to say. So the maximum word count for the Common Up essay is 650 words. But again, for the first draft, don't worry about that. Just write everything you have to say, and then you can always, condense it later. And just a reminder, so this is not an academic assignment. So once you get to the final draft, at that point you can, fine tune everything. At that point, the writing has to be impeccable. Sentence structure, grammar, vocabulary has to be perfect. And I recommend reading it out loud, which helps to uncover like either errors or minor things that need to be adjusted. Because up until then you've been working on your computer, but just hearing it out loud makes a big difference. And another thing I would recommend is just take a few days away from it and then read it again with a fresh perspective. And that will, again, reveal any little things that might need to be adjusted. Okay. The beginning and the end of essays. So here's an interesting section here. So the beginning of essays. So here's some beginning of books. So Call Me Ishmael. So we have a lot of bright students on the call. Anyone know which book this is the first sentence for? Nobody? Okay. Herman Melville, Moby Dick. And this is a classic. Another one. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Nobody? Okay, maybe I need to pick more current books. So this is Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. So why do I mention these? So the opening of the essay is very, very important. You want to grab their attention, pull the reader in from the very start, and also kind of set the tone for what's to come. So here are the endings of some books. So he was soon borne away by the waves and lost in darkness and distance. Great line. I really love it. These might be a little harder. Any guesses? This is Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. Okay, this book is a little more contemporary. So we'll take in a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe. So any sci-fi fans out there? Okay. So this is Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So as you may have guessed, why am I talking about the end of books? The closing of your essay. That's probably the most important part of the essay. It's what they're going to remember the most. It's the last thing they read. It's what they're going to come away with. And again, your goal is for them to say, like, wow, that was amazing. We have to admit this student. Okay, let me see. We're running a little short on time left. I'll go through, I have a few examples, but I think I might only have time for one. So here is a one that I'd like to cover, which is a very strong essay. So the beginning, the student writes, once I found out that the results of the AMC, which is a math exam, were available, I confidently strutted over to visit my math teacher to find just how well I did. After hearing my score, I was absolutely devastated. So then he writes, despite the setback, this pivotal event ended up profoundly changing my entire outlook on what education means to me. I became obsessed with more thoroughly grasping everything I was learning. I became much more intellectually curious, wanting to go beyond the surface, pushing me to explore everything in a way I had never done before. And then he says, including my music. So I thus started to pay heightened attention to details by carefully refining my technique. I was able to bring out the full richness of the piece, renewed his passion, and now manifest my true potential in all that I do. And then the closing line: someday I'll go back to my math teacher and tell him that what he actually gave me that day was not a test score, but something much more profound, a moment of awakening that would be a new path for my entire future. So, as a result of a failure, the student grew, matured, and became an overall better person. And also, he was able to highlight his strengths in science and music. So, I was saying before about how you want to, portray yourself very positively, but in this essay, he started out with a failure, but as a result of that, again, he became a much better student, a much better musician, um, and so very, very powerful essay. Okay, so I have a few more. Um, just briefly, this is sorry, that's the next one. Um, so this is about a musician, and she talks about, performing, gaining many awards and accolades, and even performing at Carnegie Hall. And then she discusses performing at a senior center. And then she closes the essay by saying, despite all the awards and honors, the most important moment of my music career took place at an unassuming senior center. So this was an ambitious and very accomplished musician that found that connecting with others was far more important than winning awards. So again, except before. So the takeaway, these are very different essays, very different stories, but each one demonstrates something special and unique about the student. Um, so additional essay information, you definitely want to get as much feedback from others. You'll probably get conflicting advice. So in the end, you really have to use your judgment about what is helpful. And, keep in mind, it's your essay, so you must make the final decision. The more selective a college is, the more likely they'll have supplemental essays, and the top tier colleges, they're going to have several. So make sure to create a timeline, because as much time as the Common App takes, all the supplemental essays, take a lot of time. So make sure to budget your time. Just briefly, I have the UC personal insight questions. A lot of students usually apply to the University of California, and there's 8 prompts, and of those you pick 4. And one thing I would mention on those is, so these are much more specific in terms of what they're looking for, but even so, go beyond just answering the prompt and give them more. Like, for example, one is about talking about your leadership. So, answer the prompt, tell them about your leadership, but then in addition, talk about, what you learned, what leadership means to you, how you're going to apply that, going forward. So always give them a little bit more to differentiate yourself. Okay, just a few common questions I get. Should I discuss mental illness and mental health issues? Again, this is a little bit tricky, but it depends on the extent of, I guess, the situation. Another point I get a question I get a lot is, what should I do if my life is boring? So if your life is boring, reach out to me. Your life is not boring. I can guarantee you that. Should I make use of humor? Humor in writing is very difficult. It's fine to maybe put in like one line, but I mean, the essay shouldn't really be overly, humorous. I mean, they really want to know about you. Um, and then, to what extent should I talk about my family and others in my life? This is something I come across where, like, half of the essay is all about someone's grandfather and what they learned from them. I mean, it's fine to make reference to them if that impacted who you are, but the essay should be really about you. Um, okay, AI and ChatGPT. Do not use ChatGPT to write your essay. Colleges do check these days. Um, just very briefly, a little bit about my company. So we've been in business for 12 years. We're one of the top ranked admissions firms in the country. We're not the biggest, but we are the best. We've worked with over 7,000 students from around the world, and we have very exceptional results. A lot of our students are applying to top tier colleges, and our acceptance rate is on average more than 3 times the national average. For example, for the Ivy League, the average is roughly 4.8%. Our students get accepted by 16%. So the work that we do with our students makes a huge impact. We have a lot of press coverage. I'm really excited. We were actually featured in the New York Times last year, so that was really a point of pride for us. We have an experienced team of consultants. Everyone graduated from top tier college. And the last thing I want to say is, basically how we help our students. It's all one-on-one personalized service. The first thing we do is, review your activity list, your resume, and then probably the most important part of the process is the very first meeting where we do, for lack of a better word, a background interview and learn, everything else about everything there is about you. So if you're a freshman, sophomore, or junior, we're going to focus more on strategy. Putting together a resume that once you're a senior, it's something that's really going to impress admissions. So we're going to help with classes, activities, projects, summer plans. And again, our goal is to create a really strong resume for you. And then the other group we work with is rising seniors. And this is typically the summer between junior and senior year. And for those students, we focus on the essays. We help brainstorm ideas, create outlines together, and really help with the entire process, the writing, the editing, all the way to the final draft. And so, very excited to work with you. We only work with a select number of students each year. We do offer a free consultation. So, if you're interested in scheduling a meeting, you can go right to the website, which is collegeadmissionsexperts.com, and schedule something. You're welcome to reach out to me directly. My Gmail is my name, dennis.vidach@gmail.com, or my MIT alum address, which is my initials, dgv@alum.mit.edu. If you have an account on TikTok, we have more than 125 videos, more than 17,000 followers, and so definitely recommend checking that out. Okay, so that's all I had to say. So let's spend a little bit of time on question and answer. And I'm going to go back to this slide so you can, if you wanted to write any of that down. So, yes. Looks like somebody went to the website already. Awesome.
I
Okay.
just wanted to sort of put the website in the chat for people who wanted to access it.
Okay,
And
perfect.
just a note to everyone, please feel free to ask questions directly by unmuting yourselves or placing it in the chat box. But Dennis, would you mind if I start off with a question of my own?
Sure.
All right. So I just feel that these days, many students, they feel immense pressure to optimize different parts of their application, be it internships or activities or the number of AP classes they're taking every year. So, how do you feel that students can really make their applications authentic rather than packaged or very, strategically placed? And how can they also avoid being overwhelmed in this whole process?
All right. That's a great question. Applying to college, especially if you really have your heart set on, a very selective college, there is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of work involved. One thing that I think will help a great deal, earlier I was talking about, having like a theme for your application. And once you come up with a theme, I think that's going to help you, narrow down the activities that are going to be more relevant than others. And in terms of so I think if you have like a game plan and a very detailed outline, especially if you're, again, freshman, sophomore, junior, put together a timeline that's, even, week by week. And for each week, just write what your goal is for that week, what you want to accomplish. And I think just having that in front of you is going to help a great deal because you're not, constantly thinking, oh my gosh, this week I have so much to do. What am I going to do? By having, this timeline, maybe, a fair amount to do, but at least you can look at it and say, okay, here's what's ahead of me. I got a good grasp of it. I have to just go week by week, step by step. And, by the end of the process, I'm going to have a, fantastic resume, to present to admissions. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Do you see more
Sure.
questions in the chat box?
Um, no, I don't see
All
any
right,
at the
I'll read
moment.
them out to you and you can just answer them.
Okay.
All right. So, Sharanya is asking, at what point does editing start to harm an essay rather than improve it?
Um, I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Yes. At what point does editing start to harm an essay rather than improve it?
Okay. Well, the first part of the essay is, like I was saying earlier, is the content. The ideas, what you want to say. And for that, you might require a fair amount of revisions just to, get to the point and having all of your ideas out there. So that's something that you can reiterate for a fair amount of time, and then again, assuming that you're probably going to be over the word count at that point, the next step is going to be condensing it down, and in that process, you're going to be improving the writing and just the flow of the essay and the wording. And so once you're at the final version, like I was saying, just kind of let it sit and then, revisit it. And, if there's maybe even like there's a whole paragraph at that point that, maybe is not as strong or that you're not comfortable with, you have the liberty to, continue making changes. Once you're at the final version, don't consider that to be set in stone. You definitely, it's your essay. It's a live document, so keep working at it until it's something that you're really, really impressed with, and it's very strong. Um, so yeah,
All right.
I
Thank you
hope
so
that
much.
answers the question.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Dennis, for answering that. I'll move on to the next question. So Aaron is asking, how much importance does SAT score hold in the application process? If I apply with SAT optional, does it make my chance to get accepted even more competitive?
Again, very good question. Um, as a rule of thumb, if your SAT score is at least at the median for what the college accepted the previous year or above, I would recommend submitting it. If it's below by a little bit, perhaps it's fine. But if it's significantly below, I would not submit it. And colleges do realize that if you don't submit it, it probably means that it wasn't that strong. So again, that's something to keep in mind. Top tier colleges like Ivy League, MIT, Stanford, they're really looking at least 1,500. So that's kind of like a target you want to reach, if at all possible. I know that that's like an exceptionally hard score to get to, but if you can do 1,500 plus, that's definitely gonna help you quite a bit.
All right, all right. I hope, Aaron, that answers your question. Madhura is asking, do you have any specific advice for international students?
Well, first of all, the criteria for international students is much harder than for U.S. students. So you do have to be exceptionally strong. Some colleges look at your application need blind or financial need blind. In other words, just your qualifications without need for any financial aid. However, there's a fair number of colleges that do, look at your financial resources, in addition to that. So again, it really depends on the college. So I would, look into, one by one to see what the requirements are. But in general, keep in mind that, it is going to be fairly more selective for international students.
All right, all right. Thank you so much, Dennis. I'll move on to the next question because we're getting a lot of students asking questions about different topics. So Raneem is asking how to control us to not use AI or limit it, um, be difficult with a lot of versions of AI. Raneem, do you have a minute to unmute yourself and sort of clarify your question? Because I think it's a little confusing here. In the meantime, we can move on to Victoria's question. Do you have any successful cases about the international students who received full financial aid?
Um, Again, it really depends on the college itself.
Okay.
I mean, off the top of my head, I'm a little hard pressed to come up with some that do overlook financial aid. But I mean, we do work with students, from Europe, from Asia, really all over the world, and many of those, do understand that they will have to provide financial aid. So I would say, I'm sorry, will have to pay on their own. So the majority of students are aware of that and are, comfortable to do that. But for the ones that, are looking for financial aid, I would recommend just going, to the different colleges. And actually, if you Google it, I'm sure that'll produce, a good list for you as well.
All right. We have a very interesting question from Sejal here, who's asking if there are any disadvantages to applying undecided, especially to top 20 colleges. Additionally, are there any significant benefits for being in the IB program when applying to top 20 colleges?
Okay. Well, like I was saying earlier, I mean, the best situation is if there is like an area of focus where, all of your activities, point to, some passion that you have about something. If you are undecided, I mean, your activities would have to be, especially impressive, um, if they're not, again, like centered around some common theme. So, I mean, part of college is, exploring and learning and figuring out what you actually want. So, one thing I would point out is, regardless of what theme you came up with, that's, for the college application. Once you get to college, you're free to pick anything you like. Actually, there are very few colleges where once you specify a major, you're kind of, stuck with it from the beginning. But that's very few. Like I think UC Berkeley, if you are in engineering, you're kind of stuck with that. UIUC, there are like a few, but for the most part, you're very, you're completely have the freedom to pick anything you like as once you're at college. So I would look at it as just something that you want to do again, just for the application, college application process to make you a stronger candidate.
All right. Our next question is from Aaron again. From a general perspective, what are common weaknesses you see in strong international applications that lead to rejection?
Well, I mean, really I mean, in terms of the application itself, I wouldn't really differentiate between international or from the U.S. Just, I mean, some things that are I mean, there could be many things. Maybe there's too many B's in your transcript, maybe a lack of activities, maybe no leadership position in any activity, nothing that shows initiative. Um, One thing that I see probably more than anything else is essays that are just, I mean, to be frank, I mean, they're just awful. And the reason I talk about the essays is that some students they already have everything written and they kind of come to us just for a review and making sure everything is 100%. So it's not all students that we kind of start from scratch. And I see so many essays that are just completely off base. I mean, they may be well written, but just the topic and what they're saying about themselves is just not there. Um, so again, I don't know if, oh, well, actually, one thing I do want to mention about international students, particularly in Europe, I've noticed that the programs are more focused on academics and there's not really many opportunities for extracurriculars. So for there, it's especially important to do something, again, out of the box, some kind of project that differentiates yourself. But that is, and I mean, colleges, they're aware of that if you are from Europe and certain other countries, you're a little bit limited with activities. So they are aware of that.
All right. And the second component of Aaron's question is, do admissions committees prefer fewer activities with deeper involvement or broader participation across many areas?
Yeah, definitely, fewer activities, but, going into those in much more depth. Maybe many years ago, 10, 15 years ago, they would really look at a lot of activities, but it's very different now.
All right, all right. Smarika has a question. What are most common mistakes strong students make in their college applications?
So I kind of answered that just with one of the previous questions. So maybe just to add to that, once you have everything finished, just do like a final review. Make sure everything is, 100% perfect, no mistakes, and as much as possible, everything points to, some theme, who you're about. Because when admissions committees evaluate an application. So they have a reader or sometimes two that goes through the entire application, and then when they go to committee, they'll say, okay, here's a student. They're good at music. They also play tennis and they have perfect GPA. And then they might have another student that say, okay, so this person is head of his robotics club and he also has this amazing internship. He's got a 1560. So pretty much for every application, there's like a sentence that summarizes everything. So when you're working on your application, kind of at the back of your mind, keep think about what you want that sentence to be your sentence to be when they go into committee.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for reiterating that, Dennis. Nazir has a more specific question. I have I have many research experience, uh, but my grade is low. Does it make the research experience worthy?
Yes. I mean, if there's any weakness in your application, you really need to have something else that kind of offsets it. So, for example, if your grades aren't as strong, other parts of your application, should be, especially strong. Um, and yeah, I mean, um, I mean, some students we work with, they're from disadvantaged areas, and so their grades or maybe their test scores might not be as strong, but just having overcome hurdles and various hardships, in getting a good education, again, that's something that's considered for that group of students.
All right, all right. Our next question, and I think our last question for today, is from Tamogna. Do you have any specific advice for international students who have been in the US since pre-K. I currently attend a high school in the US. Would you recommend submitting a score of 3 on a AP exam to a college? It would be in a course unrelated to the major I intend to go to.
Okay, so they want recommendations for three APs? Is that the question?
No, I think they're trying to ask if you would recommend them submitting a score of 3 on one
Oh, I
AP
see. Gotcha.
exam, but
Okay,
they do not want to pursue this course when they go to college.
okay. Yeah, if you're getting a three, definitely not. If you have, let's say, let's say five fives and then like a couple of fours, I would, or maybe even three fours, I would just show the fives and that's pretty much it. But yeah, if you're down to a three, I definitely wouldn't show that. And I mean, you actually aren't required to show any scores, but so that's the reason that if you have, really good scores, you want to, show them that you do that you did do very well on those exams.
All right, all right. Okay, so I think those were all the questions we had for the evening. Thank you so much to
Okay.
everyone for asking your questions, and thank you, Dennis, for sort of diving deep into every single one of them. Thank you for this
Certainly,
session as well. It was really informative. I'm sure we all have something to take away from it. So yeah, we really appreciate your time. Dennis,
certainly.
if
And
there's anything you'd like to close with, please
oh,
go ahead.
sure. Well, I'd like to thank you, Kishi, and also Rise Research for hosting the event. So I greatly appreciate that. And the last thing I would mention is, if anyone has any additional questions or, feel free and, send me an email or, go to the website and sign up for a consultation.
All right, all right. Thank you, Dennis, again. Thank you, everyone. Please feel free to log off now. And yeah, have a lovely rest of your day, night, evening. Yeah,
All right. Bye, everyone.
bye-bye.